that he can. And to all of you who are on Zoom, welcome to an evening of humor. Humor is something you may recall prior to dealing as we were with COVID, dealing as we were with the various elections that we have had. So sit back, take a deep breath, and enjoy what we all have to say. The one thing I will point out is that, remember, based upon my age, if you've heard me tell the same story once before, so be it. It's a question of age. You know, it's interesting when we talk about age. When my mother, God bless her soul, was along in years and she was in the nursing home, I came to see her and she said, "Well, what did you do yesterday?" I said, "Well, Mom, I ran the Boston Marathon." "Oh, did you win?" I said, "No, but I finished." "I certainly wish you'd win one once." Now, you know, we all have sports interests, especially when we were in college, and that sort of thing. And I am reminded when my son was in his senior year at Mass Maritime, and he played rugby. And he heard that they were coming up to Cambridge to play the team from MIT. And they chucked each other in the air. Can you imagine these guys with the slide rules hanging on themselves and thick glasses and carrying books on nuclear physics? Unfortunately, there were a lot of graduate students, some from South Africa, some from England, Ireland, and Scotland, and they really got beaten, but they all had a good time drinking beer afterwards. And it's a great honor to introduce to you tonight Robert Eisenberg, a member of the Temple and organizer of this, sort of my boss. He tells me, "What can I get to tell stories?" No, you're the MC. Just keep it quiet and move it along. And so in moving it along, I would like to introduce Robert.
I don't know why or how he makes these up. He does. You'll all notice that I've been going to a posture clinic on Fridays. That's why I'm really bent over now. Anyhow, I want to thank you all for coming. But most of all, I want to thank you for what you did. I'm sure you're not aware, but what you did is incredible. 4 or 5 years ago, I spoke to you in confidence. I asked you if I told you something about myself that I never told anybody else, that it wouldn't leave this room. And it hasn't. And I am so thankful for it. But the same is true, even more so. I'm not nice. And I'm surrounded with nice. Nice is everywhere in Lexington. I go to a meeting on Saturday, and everybody in the room is nice. There is nice everywhere in Lexington. I went to a building the other day, and I was going for the elevator, and somebody held the door for me. Now, I don't want anybody to hold the door for me, because then I gotta run. And I don't want to have to run. I just want to walk to the elevator. But he was being nice. You can't control nice. It's everywhere in this town. Even the drivers. They stop to let people out. Well, I'm behind them. They let people out from a driveway. They'll do anything to get that thank you. And when I talk about nice, I live with nice. My wife is the epitome of nice. You couldn't imagine things. As a matter of fact, when we get in an argument, she says, at the end of the argument. You're not nice. I say, I told you that before we got married. It shouldn't be a surprise. Now I'm going to tell you about the epitome of nice and how nice she is. We're on a plane. We're joining seats. I'm reading a book. And the guy in front of me, I hate to say it, let's go, the worst smell you can ever imagine. Now you're on a plane. You can't open a window. There was turbulence, so I got my seatbelt on. I can't move. I have no idea what to do. My eyes are tearing, I'm coughing. I am in pain, so I take the book and I blow the aroma back at the cover. Believe it or not, she grabs my arm and she says, "That's not nice." I said, "Not nice? This guy's trying to kill me, and he doesn't even know me." She then comes up with the worst pun I've ever heard. She says, "You don't have to stink to his level." Like I said, the worst pun I ever heard. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to move back to New York. I lived in New York for 10 years. And in 10 years, I never heard the word nice. As a matter of fact, my first experience in the elevators with New Yorkers, I was walking to an elevator, and the guy hit the close the door button. That New York is nice, because I didn't have to run. And then you go to a restaurant or a deli, and the waiter comes over. He says, "You've been here before. What do you think? You don't know what you want? What do you think, I got all day? Come on, tell me what you want. What are you, at your mother's house? You don't need a menu, tell me what you want." And then you're eating your meal, and about halfway done, he comes back and he says, "I got people waiting. What do you think, they got all day?" That's nice. And then a friend of mine was getting married. First he was going to have an engagement party. So I went in, I thought maybe cheese. He loved cheese. So I went into one of those exotic cheese stores. And they had a blackboard. And they had all kinds of foreign cheeses on the blackboard. Most of them I couldn't pronounce. And finally, when it came my turn, I said, I'll have a half a pound of cheddar. He looked at me, his eyes narrowed. He said, "Sonny boy, have you looked at that blackboard? Did you see cheddar on the blackboard?" "No," I said. "Well, the reason you didn't see cheddar on the blackboard is we don't carry cheddar. What do you think this is, a regular cheese store? Across the street, you see D'Agostino's. They got cheddar. You want cheddar? They have all the cheddar you ever wanted. We don't carry cheddar." Well, that was an interesting experience. And then I went downtown. A friend of mine had just been working there for about a year. And he wasn't there. So I said to the man behind the counter, I said, "Would you tell him that Robert was here to say hello?" He said, "What do I look like, a messenger?" Can't win. And then there was the deli crisis. Now, every Saturday, I would go to the Bronx. And in the Bronx was a Jewish deli that I had to walk by when I picked up my clothes. I actually worked in the Bronx and lived in Manhattan. And I wanted so badly to go in the deli. And why did I want to go in the deli? On Saturdays, my dad would have bagels and cream cheese and lox, all those wonderful things on Saturday to treat to everybody. Well, I couldn't go in. And the reason I couldn't go in is the girlfriend that I had at the time said she would not eat deli because she would not eat in a restaurant that hung tongues in the window. So what could I do? How could I go in and buy food for one person? So I would walk by there every Saturday, smelling the aroma of the half-sour pickles and the corned beef, and feeling so nostalgic for home. One Saturday I said, "You know what, Robert, you're going to go in there. You're going to face the music. You're going to go in and order." Okay. I went in. And I waited in a long line with a number. finally I got to the counter, and I could tell the guy behind the counter was not having a good day. And he hit me with a Sonny Boy too. What can I do for you, Sonny Boy? I said, I'll have around 30 cents worth of Nova. Nova? We don't have Nova here. We have Lux. You want 30 cents worth of Lux? I said, yes. Very quiet. He waited. He said, it'll be 32 cents. Is that okay? I said, yes. And I said, I'll have around 20 cents worth of cream cheese. Cut up 20 cents worth of cream cheese. And I said, I noticed your coleslaw and potato salad are both 29 cents a pound. Would you mix them? Mix them for you, Sonny Boy? Anything. So he did. And then I said, I'll have one bagel. One bagel coming up! And he went over to the cash register. And he said, on the top of his voice, you could have heard it in Manhattan, 84 cents! What are you having, a party? Well, it took me years of seeing a therapist to being able to walk into a deli again. But I did. And you know, when I lived in New York, I used to see people on the benches. And now, and then I used to think they came that way. But now I know, when I'm in New York and I sit on a bench, they didn't come that way. They were made for us. And there's that same waiter standing in front of me, saying, what do you think, I got all day? That's my seat. Get out! And talking about benches. 3 women were sitting on a bench in New York. And one of them said, do you know how much my son loves me? He sends me every Shabbat flowers. Oh. And another woman said, wow, that's impressive. She said, but my son, he calls me every day. Third woman said, my son is seeing a psychiatrist and he talks about me every single day. Talking about benches. Joy?
Well, thank you, Bob. That was excellent. I hope that gives all of us some guidance when we go to a deli with a fella who came from Dorchester. Unlike those of us who grew up in Revere, which are eminently more sophisticated. Be that as it may, I've got to tell you that a friend of mine went to confession a few years ago, having grown up in the Italian Catholic section of Revere and Protestant section. I used to have to wait out in front of Immaculate Conception for my friends to come out from catechism class in order to play baseball. But this is many years later, and he goes into confession and he says to the priest, he says, I've sinned, Father. Well, what have you done, my son? I've fooled around a bit that perhaps I shouldn't have, but, oh, tell me now, who was it? Well, he says, Father, I really can't say. Was it Rosemary Sullivan down on Park Avenue? No, I can't say, Father. He says, was it Rosemary Smith from Elm Street? No. I can't say, Father, I really can't. Well then, go and kneel in front of the altar and say 10 Hail Marys, and perhaps the good Lord will see that you are absolved. He comes out of the confession, and there's his friend standing there. And he said, you look awful, Raj. What's the matter? He says, oh, the Father was tough on me today. He's tough. I said, well, did you do something awful? He said, no, but I got two good names. And with that, I'd like to introduce a good friend and neighbor of mine, Hal Miller-Jacobs.
Thanks, George. I'm going to tell two stories about matchmaking. Rabbi's walking down the street, and he sees Moish. Moish! How you doing, Moish? Oh, fine, Rabbi. Very well, fine, thank you. Moish, how old are you, Moish? I'm 30 years old, Rabbi. Moish, do you have a family? No, Rabbi, I don't. Would you like to have a family? Oh, I'd love to have a family. So? Well, Rabbi, I tried Match.com, I tried JDate, I tried everything. I meet some lovely women, but every time I bring them home, my mother says, well, she's not this way, she's too much that way, and not this, and not that, and not... Mike, do you love your mother? Do I love my... Of course I love my mother. Well, let me put on my rabbinic hat for a minute and think about something we could do. Your mother, I know, a very social person, lots of friends. Here's what I'd like you to do, Moish. I'd like you to ask your mother to ask her friends if they know any women who might be suitable for you. And you know what? We'll call it Match.mom, all right? Oh, okay, Rabbi, I'll try that and see how it goes. 6 months go by, Rabbi's walking down the street. Hey, Moish, how you doing? Oh, fine, Rabbi. Anything new, Moish? Anything to tell? No, Rabbi, no, nothing new. Moish, did you ever try, what do we call that, Match.mom? Did you ever try that? Yeah, actually I did. So? He says, well, I met some really very, very nice women. They were really very nice. And one woman in particular, in a way, you know, she talked like my mother. She walked like my mother. She cooked like my mother. In a strange kind of way, she looked like my mother. So, sounds perfect. Would have been perfect. What's up? What's new? No, it didn't work out. It sounded absolutely perfect. Why didn't it work out? My father couldn't stand her. Another family, same problem. Yossi, they decide, Yossi, you know, you've been looking around for a mate for quite a while. How about we do it the old-fashioned way? We call a shadchan, matchmaker. All right, we'll try anything, okay. So they call a matchmaker, they give specifications and whatnot. 2 months later, the matchmaker comes back and says, I've got the perfect woman for Yossi. Let's hear, what does she look? Oh, what does she look like? She is just stunning. She has this slim-looking figure. She's somewhat a little bit tall. And not only does she look phenomenal, but for every occasion, she wears the absolute perfect outfit. The dress, whatever it is just perfect. It is absolutely perfect. And people say that she should be on the red carpet, just walking down the red carpet. No, good. How about children? Oh, her nieces and nephews, they beg their parents, please, can we spend time? Can we have an overnight with her? It's just terrific. She's just wonderful with kids. People say she should open a camp or a school or something like that for kids. She's just terrific with kids. Oh, that sounds good. Can she cook? Oh, can she cook? Wow. She can cook. People fight to invite her for Shabbos dinner because they know she'll bring some delicacy that's going to be just outstanding. It's going to be terrific. That's good. Can she daven? Oh, can she daven? When she daven, it's like the heavens open up and her prayers go right up. It's incredible. It's so powerful. Yossi's listening, and he says to the shadchan, can you come over to the side for a minute? Goes over to the side. He says, I've got a question. I just don't want everybody to hear. Those are really wonderful qualities good in bed? Well, some people say yes, some people say no. Not many of you have laughed, but many of you have not laughed at that. You realize that there's an age difference. When I tell that story to younger people, they say, so what's the punchline? Thank you.
Thank you, Hal. We would like the name of that particular section. Now, you know, many of you probably know I spent some time in the military. Thank you. And many of you may know that yesterday was Veterans Day. Yay! And people see me wearing this hat and they come up and they say, oh, thank you for your service. And I always say, thank you for paying your taxes. But there are always things that level us. And let me tell you, an event that happened some time ago when my son was younger, got a call from a good friend of mine who worked for Polaroid, but he was a graduate arborist. And so accordingly, on weekends, he would do tree work. Called me up and said, George, is Irv around? I said, well, I'm sorry to report that I think he and his buds went to the beach. Oh, darn. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've got this big tree to take down in Somerville among 3 decades. I said, Bobby, what's a friend for? I'll help out. So there I was, picture the scene, if you will. Hard hat, my his chainsaw in my hand, cutting limbs, covered with sawdust and wood chips and all manner of things. And the fella, who's the homeowner, came out, and Bob said to him, John, I'd like you to meet my friend George. He's also my lawyer. Oh, really? Margaret! Margaret! John's wife comes out, dressed in a house coat. I'd like you to meet George Silverman helping Bob with the tree work. He's also his lawyer. She takes one look at me, covered with all of the sawdust and chips, and said, doesn't have much of a practice, does it? And you know, the nice thing is that certain things occur in the course of your lifetime which are really humorous. And I can go back to my mother's comment about my running marathons and not being a particularly promising lawyer covered with sawdust. But on the other hand, I do have a unique talent. For years, I've been interested in rhododendrons and azaleas. And I was out with another couple, my wife and I, visiting some friends of theirs up in New Hampshire. And the fellow says, hey, George, I'm told that you know a little about rhododendron and azaleas. I said, well, it's always been one of my kind of curious events. He said, could you tell me the name of that particular one? Well, I got down on my knees and I looked around and I said, yes, that's a Catavienza album. Oh, wow, you really know your stuff. I said, it really helps when you leave the name tag from the person. Now, Pamela Allrack is going to join us for the next session, but unfortunately she's a bit been exposed to COVID, so accordingly, I would like to invite Rob, that's R-O-B, Cancer.
George, thank you for the warm welcome. Robert and Esther, thank you for inviting me. Hello everyone, I'm Rob Kanzer. I live in Lowell, but I spend a lot of time in Lexington. I'm the president of Lexington Toastmasters, and what we're doing here tonight is kind of like a nice extension of what we do in our club, which is we give people an opportunity to feel safe, and we practice listening and supporting one another. So for me, it's very special to be invited and to be with you tonight. I was at a wedding, and I saw a young Jew walk up to the rabbi at the mealtime after the ceremony. It was a very festive occasion. People were off, but I had the opportunity to eavesdrop on their conversation. As a life and business coach, I'm always eavesdropping and paying attention to people. So the young one says, Rabbi, do you remember me? The rabbi says, no. Should I? Who are you? Oh, Rabbi, you were so inspiring to me when I was younger. Oh, you were one of my students. Yes, Rabbi. When I was in 3rd grade, you were my teacher. I said, oh, wow, that's great, it's wonderful. It's been so many years. How are you? What's going on? What are you doing with your life? He said, well, actually, I became a teacher too. Oh, you're a teacher like me. That's wonderful. Fantastic. It sounds like that's a very good thing. He said, well, Rabbi, I'm kind of surprised. Like, don't you remember me? Because what happened in that classroom when I was in 3rd grade and you were the teacher impacted me so tremendously, it made me inspired to be a teacher. The rabbi said, I'm very sorry, I don't quite remember. He said, you'll remember, I'll tell you the story and it will come back to you. I know it was a long time ago. I was from a not well-to-do family. We didn't have a lot of money, and there was a rich kid in our class, and his mom and dad bought him the fanciest watch. I was so jealous. I wanted a watch. I wanted it to be mine. I wanted it to be mine. I wanted that watch to be mine. Day and night, I fretted, I was jealous, and then I decided, I'm going to steal that watch. So, Rabbi, we were in the classroom, and when my fellow student wasn't looking, he had laid his watch down. I took it and I put it in my pocket, and very soon after, he proclaimed, Rabbi, somebody stole my watch. And he said, boys, everybody come forward. Now, my heart's pounding. The watch is in my pocket. He said, now boys, who stole this boy's watch? Dead silence. My heart is pounding. He said, now, you're going to have to line up, boys. I want you to face the wall. I'm going to go through your pockets. And I was mortified. He said, and another thing, boys, I want you to close your eyes. So we all closed our eyes. And of course, one by one, he went through each of our pockets. He came to me, the watch was in there. He took the watch out, took it in, right? He went through all the boys' pockets. He took the watch. He said, okay, boys, sit down. He went over to the boys' desk. He laid the watch down. And we went back to our lesson. Oh, what a sigh of relief. Rabbi, I don't know if you remember this, but you made such an impact without shaming me in front of everybody. I got the deepest lesson of my life. It was from that point forward I realized you must never shame anybody, never give them a reputation for being a ganef, a thief, a sakran, a no-goodnik. You saved my soul, Rabbi. And when I started to mature, I realized I want to give that gift to young boys too. And so I decided to be a teacher. And then he turned to the rabbi, and the rabbi said, oh, that's a nice story. Rabbi, don't you remember me? I mean, it was a pretty dramatic story. And the rabbi said, you mean the time when we lined all the boys up and I said, close your eyes, and I went through them. Yes, exactly, the story I just told you when we were closing our eyes and I was trembling and you gave us that unbelievable lesson in humility, in love, in forgiveness with our eyes closed, and then you said nothing. You said, well, the reason I didn't remember who you are is I closed my eyes too. Mr. Toastmaster.
Rob, thank you very, very much for that story. Having been a lawyer for a few years, 50-odd years, I guess, I wish you had told me that beforehand. It could solve a lot of problems. But now I'm reminded about a scene in a bar down in South Boston. Fella's sitting there at the bar and he says, I'll have some of your good scotch. And make sure it's a good Irish scotch. About that time, the door to the bar opens up and another fellow comes in. He says, bartender, he says, it's been an awful day down at the docks. It's just terrible and warm and awful, and I could use a scotch and followed by a good beer. The other fellow down at the bar who's sipping at his beer looks up and says, is that a sign of a brogue I just heard? He says, it is indeed. Would you be from the old sod? He says, indeed I am. Would you be from whereabouts? He says, Dublin. Dublin, you say? Well, I'm from Dublin. He says, this is amazing. Amazing. Bartender, 2 more scotches. This is wonderful. Whereabouts in Dublin? He's down near the park. She says, yes, right down near the park. What street? He says, Elm Street. Elm Street. This is remarkable. Bartender, another 2 awards. This is wonderful. By this time, the bar door opens up to the bar. And he says, John, he says, it's been awful day. Just terrible, hard work. I need a scotch. He says, well, he says, I guess I got to go down to the bar. The Finnegan twins are in again. You know, since Pamela was not available, Pam Allrock was not available for us, Esther is willing to step forward and give us a bit of her humor. And I warn you, be careful, she's awfully funny.
First, thank you all for coming tonight. It's just wonderful to see real live human people and gathered together for a happy reason. It's 1972, and Robert and I just past week became the proud owners of a bright green Oldsmobile Cutlass convertible with a white top and white leather seats. We had 1 child, and we had been up in Maine in a Gunquid enjoying the sunshine in our convertible, and nobody knew or cared about cancer. It was all wonderful. We had driven back because our daughter's pediatrician was going to have a party, and you'll hear more about that from Robert later. But he had gone off on an errand, and he returned very close to the time that I needed to go and pick up the babysitter. And I'm getting a little antsy, and I'm looking out the window in our driveway, and I see the cars parked there, and Robert's sitting in the car. He's just sitting there. And I've got to go get the babysitter, and the babysitter. So I go out and I knock on the window of the car, and he looks up at me. And he had been so far away. I couldn't believe he had been so far away. It just took him so long to come back. And I said, what's going on? He had just bought Chris Christopherson's tape, because that's what we had, and that's it, a tape. And he was listening to the music for the first time. Totally spellbound. Okay, yeah, that was his experience, fine. He gets out of the car, he comes in. I get the car, I'm off to see the babysitter. And the tape is playing, and you may or may not know Jody and the kid, but that was playing. And I started sobbing, and I had to pull over to the side of the road. So from that time on, Chris was very much a part of the culture that we shared and we enjoyed. And actually, at one point, my daughter called up on the phone. She said, "Mom, you won't believe who I'm going out with." And I said, "Who were you going out with?" And she said, "Chris Christopherson." "Isn't he a little old for you?" She said, "No, it's his son. It's his son by his first marriage. And he's really nice." For better or worse, the relationship was short-lived. But it was fun for us, and we got to go to concerts. It was very nice. So we've been fans of country music, and not because we have fine ears, because we really don't. We're, both of us, oriented towards the word. And so tonight I want to share the lyrics of some songs that are very meaningful to both of us. And the first one is one that Chris wrote. He told us the backstory that he was a gaffer, somebody who sits around and helps out in summer stock in a little town in Arkansas. And there was a place that, all these young, hungry people would go, and where they got real meals, and it was wonderful, and he wanted to do something to honor it, and he wrote this song, "Here Comes the Rainbow Again." And my good friend Lynn Gelman is going to be the angels when we get to that part of the song. The scene is a small roadside cafe. The waitress is sweeping the floor. Two truck drivers drinking their coffee. Two Okie kids at the door. "How much is them candies?" they asked her. "How much have you got?" she replied. "We've only a penny between us." "Them's two for a penny." She lied. And the daylight grew heavy with thunder, and the smell of the rain on the wind.
Ain't that just like a human?
Here comes that rainbow again. One truck driver put down his coffee after the kids went outside. "Them candies ain't two for a penny." "What's it to you?" she replied. In silence, they finished their coffee, got up, nodded goodbye. "Hey, you left too much money." "What's it to you?" they replied. And the daylight grew heavy with thunder, and the smell of the rain on the wind.
Ain't that just like a human?
Here comes that rainbow again. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Chris for his beautiful words. This next lyric He walked into the bar and parked his lanky form upon a tall bar stool. In a soft southern drawl, he said, "I'll take a glass, anything is cool." The barroom girl, with hard and knowing eyes, looked him slowly up and down and wondered how on earth this country bumpkin ever found his way to town. She said, "Hello, country bumpkin, how's the frost out on the pumpkin? I've seen some sights, but man, you're something. Where you come from, country bumpkin?" It was just a short year later, in a bed of joy-filled tears and death-like pain, that into this wondrous world, another wonder came. The same girl's face was wrapped in raptured love and tenderness as she held the soft and warm and cuddly boy child feeding at her breast. And she said, "Hello, country bumpkin, fresh as frost out on the pumpkin. I've seen some sights, but babe, you're something." Mama loves her country bumpkin. 40 years of hard work later, in a small, quiet, peaceful country place, the heavy hand of time had not erased the raptured wonder from the woman's face. Lying on her deathbed, she knew her race was nearly run. Softly, she smiled and looked into the sad eyes of her husband and hers. She said, "So long, country bumpkins. Frost is gone now from the pumpkin. I've seen some sights, and life's been something. See you later, country bumpkin." She said, "So long, country bumpkin. The frost is gone now from the pumpkin. I've seen some sights. Life's been something. See you later."
Esther, that was very comforting. And you know, after a few weeks of turbulence of the elections, one has to take this kind of comfort when it's available. Now, let me give you a sense of comfort. This woman called her minister and said, "Father, I've had a terrible event. My brother died. He didn't leave much. He was kind of drank a bit too much. Always carried on. Was not the kind of a guy that you would welcome to your church and introduce him to such as yourself. But he left me a parrot. Now the problem with the parrot is it swears constantly. And it's an embarrassment because you know I'm very dedicated to church life. He said, well, we happen to have a parrot in the parish house, which is an amazing creature. Sits on his perch every day with his little wings folded and prays. I've never seen a parrot like him before, but he's with me now 10 years, constantly praying. Do you have a cover for your brother's parrot's cage? I do, Father. Can you bring him covered? Oh, I wouldn't bring that parrot any other place covered, because when you uncover him, he starts in with this awful language. Well, the woman shows up at the rectory, walks in with the parrot cage, and there is the other parrot sitting on its perch, praying. She uncovers the parrot, and the parrot says, I'm a whore, I'm a whore. The other parrot looks up and says, there is a God, and there's an answer. Oh, man. There is another one I will share with you quickly before I introduce my good friend Jeff. Oh, my God, he's carrying a briefcase. I think we're going to have to set forth a lot of time, so I'll make this as quick as I can. A fellow walks into the bar one day, says, I'm a little down on my luck. I don't have a farthing, but I'd like to show you something I think you'd enjoy. He reaches under his coat and brings out a box about this big, opens the box, puts a little piano on the bar, a little bitty piano and a stool. And then he reaches into his other pocket. I can see somebody may have heard this before. And puts a frog on the stool. And the frog starts playing the piano, beautifully raptures of wonderful music, modern music, folk music, jazz. And the fellow then reaches into his other pocket and brings out a mouse. Puts the mouse on the piano. And the mouse starts singing beautiful arias, beautiful, and sings folk songs after our most recent introductions of things up at Lowell at the folk festival. And this guy down the end of the bar looks over and says, I heard that you're down on your luck, old buddy. He says, but I'd be willing to make an offer for that mouse. He says, I'd give you $100 cash for that. He says, done deal. They exchange the money. The bartender brings him. He says, listen. He says, I've heard the talent of that mouse and the piano playing. That's worth more than $100. He said, no, not really. The mouse can't sing. The frogs have been qualified. And with that, I'd like to introduce my good friend. Are you still carrying some of those bluefish you caught off my boat years ago? They smell them.
I'd like to share. We're in a temple, so I can share God's blessing. Elliot, good to see you. I've had a wonderful year. And I'm a grandfather for the first time. But before COVID, I was up here making my presentation, and it was about my daughter, Jenny, who, if you want to know what she looks like, see girl in the white sweater over there. That's her twin. Anyway, Jenny's watching in Bloomington, Indiana. Anyway, the story I told a couple of years ago was about me being at Fisk School, about 2 miles from here. And Jenny was then in 5th grade. But when she was in 3rd grade, she had a teacher named Barbara Baker. And Barbara Baker was the one who was making sure that the parents picking up their kids didn't run over the other kids while they did it. So she saw me, because I'm there waiting. And she says, "Mr. Goldberg, so nice to see you." I said, "Good to see you too, Mrs. Baker." And she goes, "Oh, that Jenny of yours. She's always saying, 'Hello, Mrs. Baker. How are you today, Mrs. Baker?'" Now, this was a couple of years ago. She was her teacher, and she's been friendly ever since. Okay, school bell rings. All the kids go out of there at the speed of light, Friday afternoon or whatever it was. But Jenny walks to her own beat. I won't say she's David Thoreau, but he could have learned some lessons from her. Anyway, the kids all leave, and she just first starts to put her papers together. No rush. And she's walking down the hall, and it's sort of like this, and she's looking around. And she sees me finally, and I said, "Hi, Jenny." She says, "Hi, Dad, how are you?" I said, "I'm fine." And I said, "I just saw Mrs. Baker." And she said, "Oh, she's really nice, Dad." "Yeah, and she really likes you, Jenny." With that, Jenny looks like this, looks up this way, and then looks up this way. And then she looks at me curiously and goes, guilelessly, "Everybody likes me, Dad." So that is the story I said at her wedding this past June in Boston. And at the same time, I included as the toast at their wedding that Mark is also someone everybody likes. So I'm really blessed in that respect. Jenny, I hope you sing this okay. I'll be singing you for Thanksgiving Saturday. Okay, I want to tell you a story. Obviously, there's visual aids for this, or you can just call it show and tell. This is polymer. To be correct, it's a copolymer of polyacrylamide and acrylic acid. As you can see, it's what we call very viscous. Now, way before 9/11, they had rules about taking chemicals on a plane. You had to fill out paperwork. Nothing to do with terrorists or anything at that time, but they wanted to know, are you carrying anything dangerous? And they wanted to see the filings. The only problem is, polymers used in a variety of things, but mostly for removing solids from water, and that could be potable water, drinking water. It can be wastewater and sludge. It can be paper mills to get the water to drain out of the flow of the sheet, as they call it. It's even used in operations because it soaks up blood in very small areas. You know that. Oh, good. No, not the woman behind you, shake your head. Yeah. She'll tell you about it. Anyway, tell you this, but I cheat. Not on my wife, I cheat. There's no problem. No, there's been never a moment of even thinking about that. But I cheat when it comes to rules and regulations. So, I'm not going to go through all this. First of all, by the time you get it all done, or how long it takes you, it's too late to help your customer or see somebody new. I mean, you know, I manufacture polymer in Wisconsin at that time. I sell it all over the country, particularly Texas. And you just have to, on the spur of the moment, get on a plane to Dallas. Now, when it was New England, you know, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, I drive. Didn't have to fill out any forms. But when you fly to Dallas or Denver or San Diego, you don't have that. So here I am, I decided I'm just going to go through with this exact case, by the way. I think some of the things are still there from when I went. Anyway, I go, and what I forgot, and by the way, I don't know why, but they did have those screens, those screening, the x-rays. I don't know when they originally went in. It was not TSA, but they had something where they looked. I think it started when the guy got on the plane in Oregon and bailed out with all that money. After that, they started, I don't know. Anyway, I had forgotten I had this in my case. And this is part of a system that I build, like a reading stand to drain when you're testing things, whatever. You know, the details you don't need. But it's metal. And when they put it through this machine, it glowed like it was a nuclear reactor. Chernobyl was not as bright. And ding, 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 or whatever it goes. They saw it, and the man who's there, and there's a man and a woman. Have you ever noticed when both a man and a woman are working a job together? And it's sort of like TSA. They're doing the same thing, basically. Jeff, anything you want to add? You're all set. Okay. Anyway, the man in these kind of situations always takes this paternalistic attitude. He's in charge. He's there, and the little woman, who's his partner or whatever, doesn't have to worry about anything. The only problem is, have you also noticed that the woman usually has some intelligence, and this guy barely got out of grammar school. But, okay. So, he sees this, he opens it up, and he sees all these little containers of polymer. Now, not one of them has anything that identifies what they are. They just have numbers. Now, that's very mysterious to him. He all of a sudden thinks he solved the Brinks robbery. Or the Stewart Hart robbery, I don't know. So he asked me, what's this stuff? Now, if I tell him it's anything like a chemical, because that's what it is, at the very least, I'm screwed. I mean, he's going to say, no, you can't take that on the plane. So I had to think a little fast. And what I said was, it's bull semen.
Bull semen.
Who did that? No. Anyway, so he takes out and opens the bottle, and he goes this way, and looking at it, and thick, juicy. And then he says, well, what's the story on that? Is that valuable? I said, well, this little container that you see in front of you, I'm making this up as I go, you know, not now, but then, it's worth about $30,000. He goes, whoa! And all of a sudden you can see he got respect for me. I mean, carrying valuable commodities. So he's going to let me go through. But that woman with the brains, she has other ideas right now. And what she says is, yeah, but don't you have to refrigerate that? And I go, oh, she's got me. I'm thinking. And you know, your brain can race pretty good, but I say, better not hesitate too long. And so I thought of this. I said, yeah, that's why our stuff is so expensive. You don't have to refrigerate it. So I was allowed to go through, and when I was through and on the way, I said, gee, I wish I would have done this. Anyway, because everybody said that Pam Orrock isn't here, I'll see her at our class Tuesday morning, I'm going to do one more.
I kind of suspected that.
Okay. Bob didn't want me to do this one, but I love it. So there's a myth. The myth is that Jewish students in high school are smart, right? They're high achievers. Not my friends. Out of a class of 750, my friends Freddie Israel, Bobby Diamond, and Mark Sheroff all had the dubious distinction of being 600 or lower in class ranking. Tough with 750. But there's an equal rumor that is true, or a cultural thing, and that is that Jewish kids have to go to college. I mean, at that time, you had to go to college. Well, the only place they could get into, when we lived in New Jersey, was Fairleigh Dickinson Night School, which published that you had to have a rectal temperature of 96.8 or 98.6 plus or minus 5 degrees. So they got in, only they didn't get that distinguished class ranking just because they were stupid. They were also lazy. So they cut school a lot. And the professor, who basically, you know, it's night school, it's fairly different. He's not really a professor, he's a lecturer, he's a teacher, he's got some knowledge in it. But it's in his best interest not to lose all his students, because they'll probably cancel his class for the next semester. So he calls them in and says, listen guys, you missed the midterm, you've cut a lot of classes, but I'll tell you what I'll do. There's a makeup for everybody who missed it. You know, some people during the day, they had excuses ahead of time. We're going to have a makeup, and I forgot the date, but it's somewhere in November. They knew it. And he says, I've got a study sheet for you. And later on, they shared that every single question on the exam that they found out later was on this study sheet. So they had to study 50 questions, and they would have done fine. The problem is, the day of the makeup exam, the Verizon Narrows Bridge was opening between Lower Manhattan and is it Brooklyn, I think, or Staten Island, or whatever. I'm not a New Yorker, John, you know where it goes. Okay. And Bobby Diamond says, we can take our midterm exam, or we can watch the bridge get open. Now, I can ask for a show of hands about which one they chose, but I don't like unanimity. So obviously, they chose going to see the bridge. But that's not the punchline. Drinking age in New York was 18 at that time. Drinking age in New Jersey was 21. So we often would get together and go. I mean, some of us were in college, and Bobby was doing what he's doing no longer in night school. And we go to a place, some of you might know, called McSorley's, which at that point was all males. And it was an easy place to drink, cheap beer, and we went. But when you come out of McSorley's, which is on 6th, and like, look, it's the part of Manhattan that you can go east on and be farther east than Queens is. I mean, it just butts out those lower things. Chinatown is west of there, Allen Street, Lower East Side. John, help me out if I'm wrong. Anyway, he lives in Cambridge now. We'll let him go. All right. So we go, and as we're going, you get a perfect view of the bridge. And Bob Diamond says, if it weren't for that effing bridge, I'd be a PhD.
Well, I would say that most of us have been over that bridge.
Sorry.
You know, we've had a hurricane come through Florida, and so therefore I'd like to back up this joke to 4 months ago, when a woman comes down in a gated community and sees a gentleman sitting beside the pool that she doesn't recognize. How are you, sir? Are you new? Yes, ma'am, I am. Oh, when did you get here? Well, I was released from jail about a month ago, and I came in yesterday. Jail? Jail? What were you in jail for? They say I killed my wife 10 years ago. Oh, so you're a single gentleman. One other I'd like to share with you, if you'll all bear with me. I look at the schedule and see that probably I ought to tell one more joke, if I may. 4 fellas have been friends for years, played golf every Wednesday for several years. One, a businessman. One, a minister, Smith, Reverend Smith. The other, Father Mulcahy from St. Bridget's. And the other, a rabbi, Rabbi Schultz. They receive a phone call from the businessman's wife. Gentlemen, I have very bad news. My husband is now in hospice and will soon expire. That's why you haven't heard from him for a while. But he wants to see the 3 of you, so the 3 of them go together to see the gentleman who reaches under his pillow. He said, "You, my best friends, my golf friends, religious men, I trust you explicitly and have for years." Reaches under his pillow and brings forth 3 envelopes. Gentlemen, he says, in each of these envelopes, you will find $2,000 in cash. You know how hard I've worked And they say that when I'm gone, I can't take anything with me. But the one thing I know is I can trust you to, when I'm to be buried, and after others have left, throw the envelopes in the grave. They acknowledge they will and take the money and go off. Several weeks later, 2 weeks later, they're on the edge of the grave. People are leaving, the mourners are leaving. And each of them reaches into his vestments, removes an envelope, throws it into the grave. Reverend Smith says, gentlemen, he says, I have a terrible, terrible confession. You know, my parish is getting older. And they couldn't hear me speak, so I had to spend $500 to install a microphone and an amplifier so that people could hear what I was saying. Father Mulcahy says, I know precisely what you're talking about. He says, the trouble is, he says, my parish is getting older too. And I had to put $1,000 into the heating so that I could at least get the temperature up above freezing, poor things. Rabbi Schultz looks at them and he says, he says, I can't believe it. John trusted us to do the right thing. I want you to know that I am shocked, and I want you to know that I have a check for the full amount in my envelope. And with that, I'd like to introduce Bob Weston. Sandy, are you coming forward? I am delighted to introduce Sandy. Sandy is the wife of Hal Miller Jacobs, and she will entertain you, I'm sure. Sandy,
Lillian, I'm much smaller than everybody else.
Good things come in small.
Good things come in small packages. However, I happen to have certain things that get me upset. One of them is that I have very, very strange nails. Now, everybody has something about themselves that they don't like. Their foot turns in, their hair is the wrong color, they wish they were a little bit taller, they wish they were a little bit smaller. But eventually you kind of get used to it. So when I was a kid, my nails, you could see that if you were close, you could see that they kind of grow up. So when they came out with you could put on fake nails, I went running to CVS to buy them. And of course, they totally stood up on each of my fingers, and I couldn't do it at all. Okay. Well, as a kid, I looked at my hands, and I really was very upset. So all my friends were, painting their nails and doing this and that. And I would keep putting my fingers in my pockets and I didn't want anybody to see it. And in fact, when I went to my high school reunion, one of the girls that I was friendly with said, "Do you still play with your nails to try to get them to look bigger?" And I thought, this goes back a long way, but yes, I do that. I really finally came out to my mother one day and said, I really am unhappy about my nails. I don't know what I can ever do. Everybody's out there playing with their nails, and I have the ugliest nails. You don't have those nails. She said, but honey, every time I look at you, and I look at your hands, and I look at your nails, I remember my mother. She had the same hands as you, the same nails as you, and it brings me back, and it makes me feel so good. I'm like, well, that's investigating. I'm gonna look at this picture and I'm gonna see if her nails are just like mine. And I look at the picture day after day after day, and I get nothing. I can't figure it out. It's blurry, it's too small. I'm looking for all the pictures that my mother might have of her mother. I cannot come up with any answers. I don't know what to say. I get married to Hal. I get pregnant. We're in for the first grandchild that my mothers and father are going to have. And of course, I'm in the hospital, nothing's happening, the doctor's waiting with me. He said, oh, it's my anniversary this week. And I said, oh, I feel really terrible that this is your anniversary and nothing's happening here. He said, well, you're going to have a C-section, and I'm just waiting for them to empty the room. We can go in and do this. So we're kind of hanging out there, and the nurse walks in and says, there's someone outside that says she's your mother and that she wants to tell you that, she's here. I said, Hal, go outside and see who's trying to come in, because I didn't tell my mother that I was about ready to give birth. She doesn't drive her car. It's the middle of the night. I can't imagine how she could have gotten here. Hal goes out. He says, we said to them, just go out and just make sure it's not like some friend who's trying to figure out and come and see me. So he goes out with the nurse, and they look at the woman, and Hal says, yeah, that is her mother. I don't know how she got here, but she must have taken a bus. Maybe she took an airplane. I don't know how she got here. But she's really waiting. She came without her husband. I mean, my mother never did stuff like that. Walks back in and says, it's your mom. She's sitting out there waiting. She doesn't want to miss this event. I said, okay. We go in, the doctor does the C-section, come out, and I look at the baby, and of course I check the baby in my arms, and I look at her face, and I look at her toenails, and I look at her fingernails. Send my mother in. My mother comes in, and I said, Mom, it's a girl, and it's your first granddaughter. It's your grandmother. And she goes, oh, that's so wonderful. I'm so excited. And I said, well, would you like to hold her? Do you think it's okay if I hold her? I said, yes. As I pass her to my mother, I say to her, but Mom, she doesn't have my fingernails. Without blinking, my mother says, thank God!
It's a pleasure to hear that my friend Jeff is a grandfather, that Hal had that baby girl years ago who's now, I believe, providing them with grandchildren. There's a couple of things that reminds me of the fact that the other day I stopped in to have a cup of coffee, and this young woman and another young woman were sitting at the other table, and I sat down to sip my coffee, and she looked up and smiled and winked at me. And I said, wow. I said, what an honor. And then I heard her whisper to a friend, yeah, I did smile and wink at that gentleman. He looks just like my grandfather. And with that, I'd like to introduce Hal, who's going to talk about it. Aren't you going to speak now?
Oh, me? Sure. Okay. Thank you. All right. Hedge fund manager in New York. Very successful hedge fund manager. And he wants to give something of value to his university, Yeshiva University. He says, what can I give Yeshiva University that they do not have now? And in consults and he finds out that Yeshiva University does not have a crew team. And he says, I am going to underwrite a crew team for Yeshiva University. And he does that, and he buys the boathouse and the shells and the training and the teachers and whatnot, and they train a crew of rowers and so forth, and they practice on the East River. They're going strong. Finally, they say, we are ready. And we are ready. The head of the Charles is coming up in a few weeks, but before that, we want to go up and practice against Harvard and see how we do. And they send the crew team up to Harvard. They come back. Oh, everybody's downtrodden. Everybody's up. What happened? What happened? You were practicing. What happened? They said, well, they do things a little bit different at Harvard. They have 10 guys rowing and 1 guy screaming. So this chassid walks into a bar, George's bar, and the bartender is looking at, whoa, what is this chassid doing? The chassid, of course, has a long black coat. He's got this strimal, this fur hat. It goes a mile high, circular around. Long beard, and on his shoulder is a parrot. The bartender is bewildered, and he says, where'd you get him? And the parrot says, in Brooklyn, they're all over the place.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to probably our last human person, Robert will come forward and drive you away.
Thank you. Thank you, George. Great job. This is a true story, as all my stories are. Because as you know, I'm not nice. This story is called Life of the Party. Now, you have to think about it. I'm 4 years old, and I have never been to a party. And my mom says, I'm going to get you a bow tie and put it on. She does a pink bow tie. And she walks me to my best friend Howard's house, which is a couple of doors down from mine. And I'm so excited. She kisses me on the forehead and fixes my tie again. And she says, now, Bobby, I want you to be my best boy. I said, Mommy, of course I will. I'll be so good. I'll be perfect. Well, I was so excited. It was my very first party. And they were playing games, pinning the tail on the donkey. They were playing with marbles. There were all kinds of exciting things. And then there was cake and ice cream. I was having the time of my life. And then the presents came. One after another, after another. Now, I couldn't count. But after probably so many presents, I couldn't even see Howard anymore. All the presents were lined up in front of him. So when one more present came out, I said, just like Rob's friend said, I said, that one's mine. And I said, no, that's Howard's. It's his birthday. I said, no, that one's mine. Howard's had enough presents. The man said, no, you have to behave. Those are Howard's presents. I said, no, that one's mine. She called my mom. My mom took me home, kicking and screaming. That one was mine! Howard had so many presents, and I didn't have any. Well, what happened was, I got a reputation for raising a ruckus. Within a 50-mile radius, nobody would have me at a party. While mitzvahs came, I heard about knishes, I heard about dancing, but nobody would have me. Same thing with confirmations. I had never been to a party. Couldn't have him. He'll raise a ruckus. Well, when I got to my early 20s, I still hadn't been to a party. Some of my friends were getting married. And they wanted to have me. But the woman that they were marrying had heard about me. And they said, no, can't have him. He'll raise a ruckus. Can't have him. So here I am, now 21 years old. And the only party I'd ever been to was Howard's birthday party. What could I do? I decided I'd move to New York. 200 miles away. Nobody would know my reputation. And, you know, I maybe would get invited to parties. So I moved into an apartment, and I was very lucky. There were a lot of women in this apartment, in various rooms, and they said, you know, Robert, we have parties every Friday night, and we'd love you to come. Most of the people are editors in these parties, and I know you'll have a good time. But there are rules, Robert, at New York parties. For instance, you can only talk to a person for about 3 minutes. Oh, I thought that was wonderful. Because what was I going to say more than 2 minutes? I had nothing to say that I could think of. So I started getting party savvy, and I started getting to these parties, and I was having a really good time. I was really starting to get the ropes. And one night, this woman walks in, and she is my dream fantasy. She's perfect. So I asked somebody her name, and they said, she's Dominique. Her name is Dominique, and she's a head editor at Vogue magazine, and she eats guys like you up for lunch. She's not nice. I wasn't nervous or anything. What could I lose? So I walked over to Dominique, and she looked at me, and she said, yes. And I said, well, last night I saw a Fellini movie. She said, sum it up succinctly. I didn't know what to say. I used a word that I had never used before. I had no idea what it meant, but I figured I'd say it. I said, existential. She looked at me. She knew by my look that I had no idea what existential meant. And she stomped off. But that was the blessing of my life. Because the next woman that I walked over to said her name was Esther Nan Bell. And she had come in from Marblehead. She had heard about this party in New York from a friend. And she said she was so excited. She was just, her eyes were radiating. And the reason she was so excited is she said she had never been to a party before. This was her very first party. And I said, why? What happened? How come you went to a party? She said, well, I was invited to many parties. But my dad was a polo enthusiast. And so when I was old enough to walk, he put me on horses to learn how to play polo. And every single weekend of my life, I rode horses and played polo. And so I never had time to go to a party. And I'm so excited to be at this party. Well, I then told her about my party plight. And immediately she was empathetic. She said, I understand, I feel so sad for you that you weren't ever invited to a party. So we got married the next day. Because we knew we had so much in common. And we could share so many stories about never going to a party. Well, she saw what I was doing in business, which was designing shoes and boots. And she got excited about that. So she decided that she would design cowboy boots for polo experience and horseback riding. So the two of us were designing, and we subscribed to Women's Wear Daily. Now, we were excited about that because we thought we could learn a thing or two. But every single week, there'd be pictures of parties. And there'd be all these beautiful people dancing and smiling and hugging. And underneath the caption would invariably say, anybody who was anybody was at these parties. Anybody who was anybody, we would look at each other. We're not anybody. We don't count. Nobody invites us. We knew it was time to leave New York. We'd moved back to Massachusetts. We had to be careful. We had to be away from Dorchester, where I had made that ruckus at Howard's party. So we moved to Newburyport, which was 50 miles from Dorchester. And as soon as we got to Newburyport, I think Esther alluded to one of the parties that we were invited to. It was a doctor's party. And he had just divorced his wife and married his nurse and built a new house with a pool. Well, it was stifling hot. And for some reason, well, it was a good reason because everybody had, dress clothes on. He said nobody can go in the pool. But then, within maybe a half an hour, he defied his own issue. And he pushed his ex-roommate in the pool. Well, do I have to tell you what broke out? All hell. Everybody started jumping in the pool with their clothes on. For about 5 minutes, their clothes stayed on. Then they all spread down. Esther looked at this, and she said, I have some laundry to do at home. I think I'll go home and get it, and I'll pick you up later. I said, don't hurry back. I said, I want to make sure things don't get out of hand here. Well, Newburyport was incredible. There were parties after parties. There were pre-parties and party after party. It was just a party town, and we were getting pretty party savvy. We were really getting to think that we really knew all about parties. Well, one Saturday we went downtown in Newburyport. Now, Newburyport was special. It doesn't happen in Lexington. You'd go down there and you'd see everybody you knew, and you'd buy a newspaper. It would take all day. So we ran into one of our friends who we saw at a party. His name was Don. And he said, I'll see you guys tonight at Bill's. We looked at him and said, no, we're going to France. He looked at us with sad eyes. We were going to the bee party. Oh, no. The bee party once again. We weren't invited to parties in New York, and now we're going to the bee party. We had to leave Newburyport. We couldn't stay in a town where we were invited to bee parties. So we moved to Lexington. Nobody knew our reputation because they were all involved in much more serious things. So they didn't know anything about 4-year-old birthday parties. And immediately we were invited to parties. But it was very different in Newburyport. Nobody was drinking. Nobody was smoking. All of these people seemed to be huddled in a corner, whispering and talking. So we went over to find out what they were talking about. They all had children about our children's age, about 14 or 15. And they're all talking about early admission to MIT and Harvard. Oh my God, our kids were home watching reruns of Love Boat. We couldn't fit into these parties, so we went home to our kids. And you know what? That was the end of life of the party. And I have to tell you, there aren't many blessings about getting old, but there is one thing I can think of. You go to the supermarket, you buy whatever you buy, and you come home and you look in the bag, and everything's a surprise.
Well, thank you, Robert. And now I'd like to say that Robert would like to invite all of you to have an ice cream bar. And thank you so much for coming and enjoying and laughing. Thank you both.